Now, where do those photos go? I mean, I'm assuming they go on your website, but where else do they go?
So they go on the MLS.
Okay.
We have to upload them to the MLS. And depending on, like, I've got a photo shoot tomorrow on an 850 square foot condominium. There's going to be probably 20 to 25 photos of that unit. If it's a 6,000 square foot house, there could be 100 photos. And you've got on the MLS now, I think we're up to like 48 photos you can put on the MLS. It used to be about half that.
Videos as well?
Nope, not videos. You can add links on the MLS to those videos. They're very careful about how you brand them. But video is kind of the new name of the game. And I'll be honest with you, it's something that I have not really kind of jumped into myself yet. But I will tell you, there's absolutely no excuse for any real estate agent to call themselves a real estate agent and not use professional photos for every property they market. We're marketers, and if we're not marketing the property in its best light, then we're not doing our job.
I've seen some virtual tours where you've almost got like a 360-degree view, or almost like Google has, street views where you can kind of move around the house.
That's Matterport. Yeah, it's a Matterport technology where you literally can walk through a house and turn and do a 360-degree view from every point of that house to really feel like you're standing there. And listen, I used to work with a lot of hockey players, and in the off season they weren't here.
Right.
And they did housing for when they came to town, whether it was rentals or to buy something. And I used to, I'd have to always get permission from the listing agent, but I would run through and shoot a video on my iPhone in this case, and then send them a private link. I'd post it on YouTube or something along those lines on a private link, always getting permission from the listing agent to do that. But you have to take advantage of that technology. And so I can't tell you how many times I had clients, hockey players in this case, sign leases, and they'd never step foot in the house, but they were relying on the videos I took for them.
And that happens to out-of-state buyers, I'm sure.
All the time.
At least it gives them an idea of how to narrow it down.
FaceTime has become a big thing too. To FaceTime a client while you're walking through a house. I always say that to my clients that are busy, even that live in town here. They're busy 9 to 5 or whatever their hours are, and they're busy with their kids' activities. I always say if something comes on the market and you're anxious, those buyers that need to buy something, use us. We'll go to the house and we'll get permission. If they give us permission to FaceTime you, we'll do that while we're there, and so you can feel like you're there with us. So, and then you can decide whether you want to come see the house or not, and get off of work or miss your son or daughter's soccer game to be there.
So you literally go to the property and FaceTime them live, and they talk to you and say, "Can I see this?" or go closer and ask you questions.
Okay. All the time.
Okay.
Always getting permission from the listing agent that we're
Right.
going to be using the technology. With FaceTime, you're not recording anything, so I don't know why that would be a concern to anyone. If your buyer's either staying in the house or staying on the sideline of a soccer game looking at it, nothing's being recorded. But I always get permission.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. But that's becoming a very common request from my clients.
What type of social media do you use, and do sellers and buyers use, and how effective is it nowadays?
It's a big part of our business. It's something I've always, when you asked me earlier about how I got my name out there, and I said, the subtle signature, I'm just not comfortable blasting people all the time about what I do. And there's a lot of agents that do that, and good for them. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just not something that's in my comfort zone. So I always like to do things a little more subtly. On my Facebook page, I usually post pre-lists or buyer needs, things like that, to remind people.
Get the word out to friends and
exactly.
Else, yeah.
And also as a subtle reminder, this is the industry that I'm in, because I'm also in the restaurant industry, which we talked about before the show, and people get confused where I spend my time. That's probably the most common question I get asked is, where are you spending your time? And it's 99.5% real estate and 0.5% restaurant investments. So I do that to remind people that this is what I do.
Right.
But it's also to benefit my clients. If we got a pre-list, we want to get the word out there. And like I said, there's no market time accumulating, so you want to just get it out there as much as you can to as many people as you can. But social media has become a huge part of it. I have I use my personal page for pre-list because I've got a tremendous amount of followers, tremendously more followers on my personal page than my professional page, because I haven't spent a lot of time on my professional page just because of the comfort level for me personally. Other agents use their professional pages, multiple times a day. I think it's fantastic, and it's done. I think it's really helped boost all their businesses. their business, I should say. Instagram is becoming the new hot avenue.
Where you can post photos there of the
Yes.
property.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I think for some of the agents that I hate to admit that I'm a little older these days, it's something I don't understand as much because you're just posting a picture and you're posting hashtags, but you're not really being able to tell a whole story. But I think Facebook's becoming a little outdated from what I hear. I still rely on it, but it sounds like Instagram is kind of king right now, and it's something that I've kind of promised myself that I'm going to understand a little bit more and spend some time on in the near future.
Well, I think it's probably like any technology. Like you have to deal with Zillow, Trulia. You start, Facebook, and then it just moves along. You have to kind of move along with it.
Exactly.
YouTube, keeping videos on there, that sort of thing.
Yes, and I think the YouTube videos and I think that stuff is, like I said, every time I turn around I see it now. It's just not something I'm comfortable with. I always say I've got a face for radio, so that might be part of the reason why. But it's just not. I'm just not necessarily as comfortable being on camera promoting myself. I wish I were, as other people are. I wish I were.
Tell me about pricing. How do you what's your method of figuring out maximum pricing, but at the same time be able to get the property sold in the correct amount of time?
And that's challenging because we all know that sellers usually think their house is worth $1 million, whether it's worth $200,000 or $800,000 or $1 million. Sellers are usually pretty fond of their house because they've got an emotional attachment to it, and so that can be the challenging thing, especially. But the first thing you do is you pull comps. You pull comparable sales in the area. That's the easiest and best model.
That's your competition.
Through competition and what's sold. Now, Zillow's got this Zestimate where they put a price on houses, which, I believe at one time, it originally, back in the day when Zillow kind of came out of nowhere, their pricing was not all that inaccurate. At least I found it in the experiences I had. It wasn't all that inaccurate, but now I would say it's all over the board. What I will tell you is we do have in our public records software, Realist, we do have some CoreLogic software that does compile public records of what is sold in the area and kind of spits out a price. Now, that is not something I rely on.
Right.
It's something I look at, and it's something I share with my clients, but it is helpful. But pulling comparable sales is definitely the best model and the oldest model because that's what an appraiser is going to use. And so you've got to have comparable sales to back up the price you give them and to get them realistic about what their house is worth. At the same time, pre-listing kind of helps that a little bit. That's where you get that constructive feedback. And like I said, it's free feedback. You're not accumulating any market time. You're getting free feedback. And so I've had clients that have thought their house was worth a lot more than I thought it was worth. And after having 4 or 5 pre-list showings, it's kind of knocked them down to my reality. And so that's been a helpful tool.
What happens when you have a stubborn seller that says, I'm not going to sell for less than this? And if you can't I know you have the ability to say, I'm not going to work with you.
Sure.
But what happens when you have somebody who either you come up with a price and it's not selling, try to get somebody to lower the price realistically, something like that.
I think if they're saying that they're not going to lower their price, and I'll tell you, I just had this happen recently. I had someone who wanted to price their condo downtown for an exorbitant amount of money. There were no comps that supported the price at all. There were no it lacked. It didn't have outdoor space, which is a huge thing. If you live downtown Minneapolis and you want to get top dollar for an upper bracket property downtown Minneapolis, you need to have outdoor space, whether it be a rooftop, balcony, somewhere to grill. People want to be outdoors, in Minnesota. We know
Common
that.
areas.
Common areas. But no, this is private area. This is private. So this building had it
for each unit?
Unit, yes.
Oh.
So when you're talking $1 million plus condo, people are going to have expectations along with that price tag. And when they told me what they wanted to sell it for, I about fell over because I knew there was no way they were going to get that number. Well, it turns out they did. And I turned down the listing, but it was because it was an agent who was just, new to the business, didn't necessarily know what he was doing, but good for him. Yeah. And he did I'll say this, he did a heck of a job marketing the property, did a really nice job marketing the property. But secondly, you had an agent representing a buyer who doesn't know the downtown market. And this condo did have wow factor to it. And like I said, he did a wonderful job marketing the property, but it had, it lacked key features that properties downtown need to have to get that kind of dollar amount. So, once again, you're also putting this in the hands of the appraiser. And this appraiser, who I don't know who the appraiser was, but I'm guessing this appraiser has very little experience downtown Minneapolis, because I can tell you every agent that works downtown knew this property and knew that it was overpriced and how grossly overpriced it was. Turns out they got their price.
They found a buyer.
They found a buyer. So you know what? So sometimes you have to just kind of take a leap of faith. What I always tell my stubborn sellers is, what I tell them is, we can do it your way, but I'm going to remind you daily, weekly, that this is your way. If it doesn't sell, that you're not doing things my way. And as long as you're open to me saying I told you so, we'll be fine. But at the end of the day, if I know that they're not going to drop their price at all and they're not flexible at some point, if they're told over and over and over again that the property isn't worth what they think it is, and listen, market value is what someone's willing to pay for a property. So if someone's not willing, if you built your house for $2 million, but someone's not willing to pay $1 million for it, guess what? It's not even worth $1 million, because market value is what someone's willing to pay for it. On the second half of that, it's what an appraiser is willing to appraise it for. But I've had sellers that have said, no, I won't come off this no matter what. And I've just said, in this other case, then I'm going to pass, and in this case, it kind of burned me. But I'm happy for them. I'm happy they got their price.
Well, it happens. And
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
It works in your favor at other times. I'm
Absolutely.
Sure. Balances out.
More often than not.
Yeah.
More often than not. But I always make sure that if we're going to do things their way, that they're not going to have a problem being reminded throughout the process that this is their way. It's not working out, but we're doing it their way, not my way. And whenever they want to do it my way, just let me know.
And with your experience that you've been doing this a long time, you have a little bit more abilities to pick who you want to work with. If again, make sure they're ethical working with you, make sure they're willing to get the home sold, and they're just not unrealistic. Do you work with? What's the status of working with first-time buyers right now?
So,
And I mean, let's say, at the lower end where they,
Yep. Well, what I can tell you is this: two things as far as first-time home buyers is they're my favorite. I love working with first-time home buyers, and most agents my age or been in the business 20 years aren't going to feel the same, because the financial reward at the end of the day is not going to be as large. For me, the satisfaction of helping someone and having them really needing you to hold their hand through the process. My favorite clients generally are seniors and first-time home buyers, because they appreciate you. Their family appreciates you so much for what you're doing. The process is just a lot more fun, and because it's a first time for them, everything you do is exciting. So I love that. At the same time, I've got a full-time licensed assistant who works with a lot of my buyers, so she takes on most of that load. I always get involved when she shows houses, whether she shows them 2 houses or 20 or 30 or 40 houses. If they write an offer, I always will go to the inspection or always go to the property before they write the offer, just to give my stamp of approval, just because she's not as experienced. She's fantastic, but she's just not as experienced as far as construction, quality, deferred maintenance items that might come up. And she's learning fast, but I love that part of the process.
What's the marketplace right now for properties at different price levels?
It's for the first timers, which are generally, 200 to 300 and below. It's tough. The competition is as fierce as it's ever been. There's definitely a supply and demand issue. We can get into the whole Minneapolis 2040 plan next time we talk, because that's supposed to create affordable housing. I think that's a little misleading in what it's actually going to do. But there is a lack of affordable housing, especially in the city right now, for school teachers and police officers and college, people who are in school. And the supply the demand far exceeds the supply. There's no doubt about that.
And aren't the younger first-time buyers, younger generation, let's say in their 20s, maybe early 30s even, waiting longer to buy, because it's less affordable, and maybe because they like more flexibility,
Yep.
unless they're, entertaining a family in the future.
Well, I think one of the things that we've seen is that there's a lot, we see these huge apartment buildings going up everywhere, and they've got
Right.
tremendous amenities, and they're beautiful. Some of them are mixed-use buildings where they've got restaurants or, retail on the main level. And why we're seeing that, from my understanding, is that, when someone develops a building like that, a multi-family unit like that, whether it's a condo or an apartment, the warranties on those buildings are different. If you build something that's going to be owner occupied, it's a 10-year warranty. So for structural issues or windows, things like that, so the developers were getting sued a lot more frequently than people that are building apartments because it's a 2-year warranty on the apartment. So if you're building rentals, if you're the developer, in 2 years, you're off the hook. If you're building condos, you got 10 years before you're off the hook. And obviously a lot more can go wrong in 10 years than 2 years.
Do you think it's are people waiting longer and buying less because they don't have the down payment?
Yes. So I'm sorry, to finish my point, yes. So I think because there's all these really kind of glamorous rental options out there that are somewhat more affordable, that's one of the reasons you're seeing younger people rent right now. I also think the younger generation's a little more conservative financially with their money. I think they've seen their parents go through some things, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and they've kind of learned from that, and they're pretty wise. I will tell you that the other thing is the two words I hear as often as anything these days is downsize and simplify. So these big, massive houses people were building, I think people have learned from what happened, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, is people are trying to simplify their lives and downsize. I think these kids are teaching us a lot.
And they like to have a place to live, but they want to use their money for other things.
Yes.
In,
Lifestyle.
leisurely lifestyle things, travel, whatever it may
Absolutely.
be. Okay.
Absolutely.
Let's touch a little bit about your relationship with sellers or buyers, as far as your agreement, like listing agreements, for example, or buyer agreements.
Sure.
Just give me a sense of how that works. A lot of people don't understand what their obligations are and what
Sure.
you'll do for them.
Well, and I'm probably fairly unique. I think there's probably a number of agents that go about the buyer process. I don't make anyone sign a buyer's representative agreement with me until we're sitting down to write an offer on a property. I do have them sign an agency relations disclosure,
Yeah.
which is required on first meeting with the client or potential client. But I don't have people sign a buyer's rep with me until we're actually sitting down to write an offer on a house. And part of that is to disarm them and make them feel comfortable that they're not tied to me. I figure if I do my job and I'm communicating with them, which is, that's the biggest key in the industry, is just communicate with people.
Sure.
I think agents have gotten really lazy over the years. I think they're getting better. There's no reason not to communicate with all the forms of technology we have now with text messaging and email and phone. But I don't make anyone sign a buyer's rep with me until we're sitting down. I never have in 20 years, not once. I think that's somewhat uncommon, but I know other agents that do the same. On a listing agreement, I have to have them under contract. Even if I'm just even pre-list something, I have to have them sign something saying that they're withdrawing the house, or withholding the house, I should say, from the MLS, and that they're going to list with me. But I always, always, always put a clause on every listing contract I have saying that they can break the contract if any time by written or verbal notice if they're unhappy. I don't want anyone feeling binded to working with me if they're not enjoying the process, because it's not going to be fun for either one of us.
What is the biggest challenge you find that buyers or sellers have as far as their going through the process, or their understanding the process? What's some of the biggest challenges that you have to try to?
I think right now the bigger challenge is with buyers, and having them understand the market. There's a lot of sticker shock out there. I think people who move here from other cities are completely shocked by the prices here, unless they're coming from the West Coast. But I think if they're coming from the Midwest and even parts of the East Coast, they're a little surprised that pricing isn't that different here than it is where they're coming from, even if it's a major city. So that's one challenge, is just kind of having them understand the market here. The other thing is, we get into multiple offer situations all the time right now. And that's a real challenge, because people are making emotional decisions, and our job is to try to be compassionate and understanding and have them excited about the process, but also remove the emotions so they're making sensible decisions. And when you get into multiple offers, which is a common thing, especially in that lower price range, it's very difficult to talk someone through that when they're spending $300,000 for the first time in their lives, and we know the house is going to sell for $325, even though it's listed for $300 because there's 7 offers on it. And to talk them through that, and sometimes what they have to do is they have to lose a couple times to really understand that, okay, if I really want to go after this, I'm going to have to make somewhat of an emotional decision, but at the end, I mean, it's what it's going to take.
And the higher price isn't always the best buyer or best purchase agreement. Is that correct? In other
Yeah,
words,
there's certainly there's certain. I just had an offer the other day where they were close, and the higher offer did not get the property because the lower offer didn't include an inspection contingency. And so there's terms that bring value to a purchase agreement aside from money. I will tell you, at the end of the day, more often than not, it's the dollar amount that usually gets the house. But certainly there are other terms and conditions, flexibility on closing, things like that are very important. And buyers bringing a commitment date on their financing so that a seller's not taking their house off the market for 60 days and left vulnerable. We want to know that that loan is approved, weeks before closing, and the buyer can perform.
being an attorney and working in the real estate industry for clients and getting referrals from agents like yourself, I know controversies come up, legal issues come up. I'm the type of attorney that tries to solve problems and make sure the deals work and make sure everybody is comfortable with going forward or the outcome, whether it be going forward or canceling. What percentage do you find that becomes very contentious between buyer and seller as far as I'm sure there's some contention between, did you leave the, refrigerator or not, or did you replace that lamp, but not those types of things. But how about what percentage is there a high level problem?
High level, I'd say it's less than 10%.
Okay.
And I would say on those occasions that a lot of times I look at myself and say, okay, what could I have done better? There's plenty of times where my clients have believe they have a contentious relationship with the other party, even though they've never spoken and never met, just because they're both negotiating to get the best for their family. And that's where I have to look at myself and say, hey, how am I not communicating this information properly? Because that's all they're trying to do. One side is trying to do the exact same thing the other side is, and there shouldn't be it's business.
But you're talking about just negotiating. Thing, not necessarily.
Well, but okay, here's a perfect example. Is that I think this is a good example of what you're asking. Is that I had an inspection recently, and the inspector, who's a professional, and someone I was my listing. I'm representing the seller. The buyer brought an inspector who seemed to be reputable. I had no experience with this inspector, but he went in and took a permanent marker and wrote some dates on the furnace, on the side of the furnace about changing filters. Well, it wasn't their house yet. My clients lost their you-know-what. And it literally almost blew up the deal. And I try to tell my clients, listen, this isn't, the buyers didn't do this to you. This is someone that they hired, who their agent probably suggested they hire. The inspector did. Our issue is with the inspector, not with the buyers. But it was really hard for them to let that go. And it took a lot of late night phone conversations keeping the deal together because of the actions of this inspector.
But it's a lot of times it's smoothing things over.
Yes,
for the most part.
That's our job.
And I know there's problems with finances, that things fall apart, or maybe early on inspections and they can't agree on things. I mean, obviously those are part of the nature of the business. But usually people can get beyond those, right? I mean,
usually, and I always tell my buyers or my sellers that, hey, listen, if after an inspection, the inspector's there to tell the buyer what's wrong with the house, right? They're not there to tell them how wonderful it is. And hopefully they will share what's wonderful about it as well. But their job is to pick the house apart, pick the property apart. And the buyer's relying on that. The buyer's paying them and relying on them to protect them. And then I always tell my clients that, listen, why would a buyer take on a seller's reality? Like if there's an issue with the house, and it's a major, listen, most of these inspection reports have 50, 60 items on them that are nitpicky. But if there's 3 or 4 that are big, why would a buyer take on that issue themselves? Like, I just had an inspection where we had, 14 windows that were rotted out. Well, why would my clients as a buyers buy that house with 14 rotted windows to fix those windows is an improvement. Now, putting in a new furnace is because you know you're going to have to change the furnace out every few years. Not, well, a few years, every 20, 25 years. But that would be seen as an upgrade, a new furnace. New windows would be seen as an upgrade, but repaired windows are not. I mean, repaired, that's a repair issue, not a replacement issue, and not an upgrade issue. And the listing agent and I butted heads a little bit about that. In the end, we got it done. In the end, we got on the same page and understood. And that's our job, to try to get on the same page and keep the deal together, as long as the buyer still wants to buy the house and the seller still wants to sell the house. Work these things out. But I think that the contentious issues sometimes come from just the whole process being emotional, and it's not really, like I said, it's the buyers wanting the best for their family, the sellers wanting the best for their family.
And it's not even though it's a business transaction, you just said what struck me was it's an emotional transaction. Always. Because sometimes people are selling almost always they're selling their home, their family, their memories, and they want to move on, but it's not necessarily the financial part of it that's the hardest.
Right.
Obviously, it's an important portion of it. And so that, sometimes you have to be careful, I'm sure, when you have buyers, for them not to be too harsh on the place.
Yes.
And understand where the people are coming from.
But that's also my job, is to communicate that information in a way that it won't come across as being insulting or too abrasive or too harsh. But listen, I've had 3 closings in the last week where there were tears, and there were tears of just the memories. It was just emotional. They packed up their truck. They looked at the house. These 3 different families whose kids were born in that house and raised in that house for anywhere from 3 years to 7 years. And very emotional day. And as an agent, you need to be aware of that and be thoughtful about that.
On a personal note, we lived in our house over 20 years. Didn't expect to be there that long, but that's not uncommon.
Sure.
There was 2 other families prior to us. Again, same thing. Kids grew up as babies all the way through graduation of college. And, we're in that situation now where our kids are graduating from college. And same thing. There's a lot of memories there. And although I may be less inclined, I'd be more inclined to sell the house than my wife would. Every time I mention it, she cries. And even my kids say, well, eventually we're going to get married and we have to somewhere to bring our grandkids. And I want them to bring them here. I'm like, well, we'll have that conversation later.
Call me if you need me to come in and try to referee that. But those are tough conversations. Those are tough conversations. And we do, as agents, we do get in the middle of those all the time. Yeah, and we deal with dealing with married couples that necessarily aren't on the same page.
Sure.
And and it's just, it makes sense to come in and kind of be a therapist and just listen. And just listen and answer questions. They have questions, but just be there and almost listen, almost like a referee sometimes.
Right, or a therapist.
Or a therapist, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll wind this up. And is there anything else you want to share that we haven't talked about?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think probably covered it all. I probably talked your ear off. So
well, we probably could talk a couple more hours, I'm sure, because it's an endless list of things to think about or know about.
Sure.
And then maybe just tell me a little bit about how somebody can get a hold of you and, kind of what you'd be willing to do for somebody.
Sure. So like I said, we just love working with good people. My assistant, Senna Nilitz, who has been in the business now for a year, I stole her from my title closer. I poached her away from my title closer. Fortunately, my title closer hasn't fired me, and we still have a good relationship. But my assistant is licensed now for about 7 months or so, but been with me for a year. Changed my life, best thing that ever happened to me. And she loves working with people as much as I do, and she has the same values and ethics that I do, fortunately. And we just like working with good people and holding their hand through the process and making it as seamless as possible. Whether as a seller, like today, we were with HVAC contractors at a house getting bids after bad inspection. And we take care of those items for our seller. We don't, we always try to go above and beyond. And so after you get some information that maybe wasn't expected, we try to make the process seamless and once again, try to help remove emotion from it by making it as easy as possible and seamless as possible. So we can be reached at my email address is jettinger@edinerrealty.com. My cell phone number is 612-990-7777. And I'm on that 24/7, whether you call or text. So be happy to help you or answer anything else. We love just giving people advice and just helping them answer questions. So, I mean, I'd say half the calls I get aren't even from potential clients, just people asking me for their advice because they know someone I know and someone told them I'd help them out. And so I love doing that.
And I know that's how you operate personally, and I know you appreciate, and sort of the people that call you appreciate it.
Well, the person I'm looking across the table from is cut from the same cloth, so I appreciate it. You just helped out a client of mine the other day, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that.
No, it's my pleasure to do that. So I appreciate you coming here today and telling me about the real estate business. And
Well, I'm glad your eyes are still open. I didn't put you to sleep.
No, I could listen for, like I say, for a couple more hours, but we'll stop here and maybe revisit in a future episode.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me, Barry. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.